number two, closely related, I'd urge you to think about is that if anything changes, it's not good. If there's a change in interest rates, it doesn't get lower than, 0. No one's going to pay you to take money. If there's change in interest rates, that capital gets more expensive. Might that be, is that a big problem? Possibly not. You can probably go up a point or two or three, and it wouldn't be the end of the world. Similarly, fuel, that sort of stable, semi-stable $100 a barrel turns out to be a bit of a sweet spot. If it goes cheaper than Delta, it looks like a bunch of geniuses holding on to older planes and investing in last generation assets like MD-90s, 717s. If it goes north, you've got a real problem, I think, with demand and profit, obviously. So in other words, all change is bad change. And we are in a place that is the result of a unique set of circumstances that will not be repeated. Now, good news, for those following book-to-bill ratios and really caring about them, we have become addicted, accustomed to 3-to-1 multiples or something like that. I mean, aside from that 2009, we've gotten to a situation where the manufacturers are really, whether they're good at it or whether they've been driven to it, they very simply have to respond to a fuel environment which is extremely challenging for airlines. So the amplitude of new product introductions has accelerated. And this is good from the standpoint of stimulating interest. Now, a lot of this, as a result, is for aircraft that will be built for another 4 years now or what have you, or even longer. But nevertheless, it's a pretty good indication that the manufacturers are stimulating demand by introducing fuel efficiency in their products. This is good. Now, a few comments about jetliner market growth over the decades to sort of help you digest where we are and where I think we might be heading. You look back and just, when random 10 years, sort of a random 10-year walk down the market, 04 to 13, wide bodies did not grow very much. Excuse me, where's my Dreamliner? That being the primary problem there. A lot about this decade kind of looked like the 80s in terms of numbers. Pretty good growth. Decade over decade growth being in the 40% something range. In other words, I think the manufacturers have been quite truthful when they said that the big run-up over the past 10 years was actually kind of overdue or warranted by demand. There's a certain fundamental demand that was very much there, and I feel good about that. One thing that was a little bit out of whack, the narrow-body side of things was the real beneficiary. Narrow bodies rose to be about 54% over the decade in output by value, just the A320 and 737. Take a poll of jet financiers. What are the two most popular assets to back with your cash? Yeah, it's the A320 and 737-800. So I think that helped drive things up. So third-party finance, bricks, very definitely helping to move things up. But let's do a little exercise here. I'll cut to the chase. Our new forecast is better than last year's forecast. I no longer see much of a gap at all between the current generation of narrow bodies and the next generation of narrow bodies. In other words, we're heading up. I don't see much risk in the short run that would derail the next couple of years. And unless there are major changes to the cost of capital or to fuel prices, we're probably good for 2018, 2019. And then we taper off. So this is a little bit slower growth than the OEMs are planning on. But nevertheless, I feel pretty good that we're heading upward. Now here's the problem. Let's redo those decade over decade numbers, this time adding a forecast. The first set of numbers for the next decade over here are if you were to freeze output at 2014 rates and just keep them constant through basically 2023. 10 years of, and that's obviously not going to happen, but let's do it as an exercise. Look what you get. You get 54% growth, a record for any decade in this business. If you follow our somewhat muted numbers, you get 64% growth. If you take the manufacturers at their word for maximum rate and for timing of each new program, and then you freeze it beyond that, you get 83% growth. In other words, I think there's a certain danger that you've gotten to the starting up point, which again was the result of a combination of a unique set of circumstances, and then you're forecasting out from that. These are big numbers, especially twin aisles. I'm most concerned about twin aisles. And obviously that's where a lot of the new launch activity is taking place. You look at the OEM plan, 787, whatever else, that's 103% growth for twin aisles. That's big. I'm real concerned about that. I feel more comfortable with our forecast, but even then, quite frankly, I look at our forecast and I just sort of have to remind myself that, again, we're coming off of a rather remarkable point that may or may not be sustainable depending upon those combination of circumstances, interest rates and fuel prices. So all this to say, I feel great, but I'm also a little bit concerned about the drivers and the quantitative fundamentals behind this. Turning now to the issue of backlog and Airbus and Boeing, guess what works really well in this business? The duopoly. Oh my God, does it work? This has created this combination of numbers. $800 billion, good Lord. That is huge. Has created effectively a wall of volume that is either designed or, as a matter of fact, just serves to keep newcomers out. Because if you're trying to break into this business, you're not competing with the average cost of the jets embedded in this backlog. You're competing with the marginal cost of building a 1500th jet or what have you on top of those planes. If someone perhaps had gone back in time, could go back in time and explain this to Bombardier, that might be a good thing, but perhaps it's a bit late. All this to say that there's nothing at all wrong with the C-Series. It's a really good plane. I endorse it. It's a good plane. They're stuck in that rather unenviable market position because they need to be a lot more aggressive given the sheer volume that they're up against. That's a real challenge. And it's a challenge for everybody who wants to break into this business. It's kind of interesting. You hear talk of the Chinese or the Russians, and people talk about lower labor rates. What possible difference does do labor rates make when you're up against this kind of pricing dynamic, the sheer volume? If your workforce is at all any good, you've achieved any level of automation, you've taken half the price of the aircraft away. As a matter of fact, one sort of interesting dynamic that we've seen in this industry, one thing that's been a real catalyst for growth, is that for over a decade now, we've had, in real terms, deflation. You look at the prices for aircraft today, they're not all that different from the prices in 2000, and planes are better. We've made so many efficiency improvements, we've achieved so many cost reduction programs in this industry that we've effectively become a model of cost containment. And that's good to spur demand. I'm a little concerned that you can't keep that going. You just can't keep taking a couple % of the cost out of the system year over year. And there's been an awful lot that's been achieved up front, but that's probably going to be less of a catalyst for growth.